Welcome into another episode of the Laser Bros podcast. I'm your host, Logan Lazarchik, and today I will be doing this show solo. Luke is on his way to Orlando as we speak. He'll be stopping in Atlanta later tonight. He's on his way to the Pop-Tarts Bowl, which he is covering K-State against North Carolina State. So this week I will be doing the episode solo. And, it's too bad Luke wasn't able to record with me today. It was a great week of football this past week. Games on Christmas, which we'll get into later. And there was a lot of major storylines coming out of this week 16 of the 2023 NFL season. A lot of playoff implications, a lot of teams showing who they are, and a lot of teams, proving that they are capable of being a playoff team, and some teams, faltering at the same time. So we'll get into that today. As I said, and as we mentioned, Luke will be back next week. We plan on recording an episode next week following week 17, but this week I will be doing an episode on my own. And for today's show, we will be focusing on 5 games, which kind of stole the headlines from this past week. And I will talk about each game individually. No predictions for this week. I usually wait to do those with Luke, so we'll get back into that next week. But for this week, we'll just talk about 5 games that I kind of thought stood out from the rest. And the first one we'll talk about was from this past Thursday night. Rams against the Saints. The Rams won 30-22, and the score does not imply how dominant the Rams were in this game. The Rams were up 30-7 late or midway through the fourth quarter. It was 37 before Derek Carr kind of buffed his stats with 2 late touchdowns to make the game a little closer. And when you really look at this game, I mean, the Rams, for the most part, did whatever they wanted to do. They had multiple drives that went inside the 5-yard line of the Saints, and sometimes they weren't able to punch it in, and other times they were. The biggest takeaway from this game is, one, the Rams are a legitimate scary team in the NFC. If you're an NFC playoff team right now, you do not want to see the Rams. The Rams are firing on all cylinders. Even when Cooper Kupp doesn't play well, Puka Nacua steps up. Matthew Stafford has played really well the past month or so. He's completing, and I'll look at it real quick right here. He's completing pretty much about 70% of his passes. The last 2 games, 70.6, and against Washington, he completed 75.8% of his passes. And during this, 5-game stretch, he has 14 touchdowns compared to 1 interception, and they've won 4 straight games. They were they've won 5 of 6. So they started the year out 3-6, and now they're 8-7. They're the 6th seed in the NFC right now. And if the season ends today, they would be playing against the Lions, which that would be a really interesting game. Matthew Stafford returning to his former team stadium, the Lions, and Jared Goff facing his former team in the Rams. Both quarterbacks were traded for each other, and then the Rams ultimately won the Super Bowl that year. But back to this game, the Rams, I think, they're running the ball well with Kyren Williams. They're using that to open up the play-action game, which, Puka Nacua has benefited a lot from. Cooper Kupp kind of struggled in this one. He dropped, you could say, 2 touchdown passes he potentially dropped. And Puka Nacua, 9 catches, 164 yards, 1 touchdown. I think the Rams right now, I think they're for sure lock playoff team. I know they haven't clinched it yet. But just kind of looking at the schedule coming up, they have the Giants coming up this week before the San Francisco 49ers. And 49ers will always be a tough game, and I expect the 49ers to probably win that game. But you'll take basically a free win against the Giants in Week 17 to improve your record 9-7, which I believe the Rams will do. But right now, like I said, the Rams right now, they're cruising right now. They're playing really good football. Sean McVay has his team playing really well, clean game plan. And the defense is stepping up. I know this defense is very young. You have Aaron Donald and then a lot of solid young players that are kind of developing throughout the season, and we kind of seen it late in the season that they're kind of finding their roles. As for the Saints, I mean, Derek Carr, he's not a good quarterback. He has a $7 million cap hit this year, which the Saints purposely structured it that way so that they can have a better team, a better roster this season to compete. Before in 2024, his cap hit will be $35 million, and in 2025, his cap number will be $45 million. So they kind of went all in for this year to compete. Weak division. They expected to win that division. Entering the year, most people had the Saints as the best team out of those four. And right now, the Buccaneers are leading that division, and we'll talk about the Buccaneers here shortly. But Derek Carr, he's not a good quarterback, and I know the stat line, if you didn't watch the game, it looks like he played well, 27 to 40, 319 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 pick. But when you really watch the game, he looks not timid in the pocket, but he just wants to get the ball out as quick as possible. He doesn't let routes develop. You see he misses Chris Olave at times. And Olave dropped a couple passes in this game that were costly, but for the most part, and most of the season, you've seen Derek Carr refuse to let the routes develop and refuse to let his receivers get open, and instead checks the ball down. And Dennis Allen, this system is check the ball down to Kamara, which wasn't really successful in this game. Kamara only had 5 catches for 16 yards and only added 19 yards on the ground. And then they put Taysom Hill in here and there, and that's just not a formula to win games. And Dennis Allen, I don't think he's a good head coach. Derek Carr's not a good quarterback. I think Dennis Allen will definitely be gone after this season. And Derek Carr, they're kind of stuck with him. And I don't know. I don't think you're going to win a division with Derek Carr. I believe he has not won a playoff game in his career. Atlanta's a young, talented roster. Arthur Smith, I think, is kind of blocking that potential. You have Desmond Ridder there, Taylor Heineke. I believe Atlanta adds a quarterback this offseason. I think potentially Justin Fields is a fit there. Tampa Bay, Baker Mayfield's playing really well. I think he's earned a contract there, maybe a 2 to 3 year deal. And Carolina, I know Carolina, they look awful, but they do have Bryce Young, and maybe they can add some pieces. With a rookie quarterback, you can afford to spend big in free agency. Now, they don't have the draft capital because they gave up a lot of that to the Bears to get Bryce Young. But I think when you look at, just future-wise of this division, I think Saints are in a pretty bad spot, I think. Cap-wise, next season, or entering this offseason, they were $87 million over the cap for the 2024 as of today. And I don't know how they're going to fix that. I mean, when you look at it, there's just not a lot of avenues to get out of money and get out of contracts without taking a lot of dead money. So, I don't know. Saints right now, they went all in for this year. They continue to push money back and back and back, dating back to a few years. They just keep pushing money back, hoping that they can win, and they really have nothing to show for it. So I think when you talk about the Saints and you look at the Saints situation, it's definitely not a good one, and I don't expect them to make the playoffs this season. I think they lose next week to Tampa Bay. And then going forward, I just don't see a path unless the other teams, just continue not to improve and their quarterback situations continue to hold them back. I think the Saints, looking at those 4 teams in the division, I think their future is most bleak. Speaking of the Buccaneers, we'll talk about that game now. The Buccaneers absolutely dominated the Jaguars. And Luke and I weren't able to watch much of this game. We were family gathering, Christmas Eve mass. But at one point, Tampa Bay was up 27-0. And Jacksonville's such a weird situation. You have Trevor Lawrence, who was viewed as a generational prospect coming into the draft. Probably most people viewed him as the best or the best since Andrew Luck. He was supposed to be a franchise quarterback, and I still believe he's a franchise quarterback. But when you watch Trevor Lawrence, there's just something missing. I don't know if there's not enough emotion there when he plays or what it is, but when you watch him entering this season, after last season, how it ended, winning a playoff game and then coming up just short against the Chiefs in the divisional round, the expectation was for Lawrence to take that next step in his development from his second year to third year, making that third-year jump. And I don't think he's regressed. I just think he hasn't improved. I see the same players last year, and he has a turnover issue. He has a turnover issue. This season, he has, and let me look real quick. I mean, this season he has 19 touchdowns passing and 12 interceptions. And then he has 7 fumbles. So he has 19 total turnovers. And then he has 2 rushing touchdowns. So 21 total touchdowns and 19 total turnovers this season. He's not taking care of the football. And when you just look at Jacksonville, there's just, I don't know what's missing. I can't put my finger on it. Maybe, I mean, Calvin Ridley, saying 2 years out of football probably took a toll on him. Probably, we see with Deshaun Watson. When you sit out multiple years in the NFL, it's kind of hard to get back to your past form. And Ridley, I think he's a fine receiver, but he was supposed to be this number one go-to option in this offense, and he's been pretty inconsistent. There's been games where he's definitely looked good, but there's been games where he's absolutely disappeared. Travis Etienne, I mean, this past week, 6 carries, 12 yards. Jacksonville's offensive line, injuries, receivers aren't playing well. Trevor Lawrence is not playing well. I think Doug Pearson's a good coach, and I don't think they should fire him. But I think next year, if they have these same issues, and kind of looking at the AFC South next year, I really think if they opened up the AFC South odds for next year, I'd probably take Houston, even without the odds, actually. I'd probably just bet Houston wins the division. That'd probably be my pick, to be quite honest. I think CJ Stroud, you can definitely make an argument that he's better than Trevor Lawrence, or he could be better than Trevor Lawrence. And I think right now it's tough. The Jacksonville Jaguars situation is tough. I think they're 8-7, and they're tied with Houston and the Colts at 8-7 for the division, and they really missed an opportunity. When you look at what happened before their game started, both the Colts and the Texans both lost their games. And Jacksonville wins, they're 9-6, and those two teams are 8-7 with 2 weeks left to play. Jacksonville's Carolina coming up this week before they face Tennessee in Week 18. They would look pretty good right now to win that division. But right now, I still think it's up in the air. I do think they win this week. So as long as they win this week, they keep controlling their own destiny, and they should win Carolina. And I know Carolina just dropped 30 on Green Bay, which was kind of pathetic from a Packers point of view. But I think Jacksonville should win this upcoming week. But yeah, you want to see your franchise quarterback uplift the team and carry the team to the finish line of the season. And Trevor Lawrence is just not doing that right now. And Lawrence suffered a shoulder injury late in this game, which he had to leave early from. And we'll see what his status is for this upcoming week. I don't know. Jacksonville, it's a tough spot. And right now they're the 4 seed. They could easily, if they somehow don't win this division, could easily find themselves out of the playoffs altogether. So they need to win this division if they want to keep themselves in the playoffs. But even in the playoffs, I think this team's a one-and-done team. I think right now if they were playing Cleveland, they would lose. And I think Cleveland ends up with the 5 seed because I think Baltimore is going to win the division. So Jacksonville, I think they're potentially one and done, and they're going to have – this is going to be a long offseason for them if that's the case. As for Tampa Bay, I mean, I'll tell you what, I was not and I've never been a huge Baker Mayfield guy, but he's played well this year, and he's played well in this stretch of games where they have to win games to get into the playoffs. They are now leading the NFC South. They are 8-7, and they face the Saints this week, which will be a pivotal divisional game. If they win that, you take the Saints out of the running for the division, and then Atlanta plays Chicago this week. With Chicago, they are not a terrible team. They've been playing better in his back half of the season, and their defense has turned around ever since the Montez Sweat trade. The game's in Chicago. That could be a tough game for Falcons. I think there's a chance that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers could wrap up their division this week. And I think if I had to put my money on it, I think they do. I think Tampa Bay wins. I think Atlanta loses to Chicago. Tampa Bay, back to Baker Mayfield, though. I've been really impressed with Baker Mayfield these last few games. I mean, this game in particular, he completed 26 of 35 for 283 and 2 with 0 interceptions. And he's been taking care of the football. He's actually been very explosive in the passing game. I mean, last 3 weeks, he has 8 touchdowns compared to 0 interceptions in the last 3 weeks. At Green Bay, at Atlanta. Both those defenses, I wouldn't say are the best defenses, but on the road, throwing 4 touchdowns against Green Bay in a pivotal game, kind of knocking Green Bay not out of the playoffs, but now Green Bay's in a tough spot right now to get into the playoffs. Baker Mayfield's been very solid, and I think, like I said, I think he's earned himself a 2 to 3 year contract. If I was Buccaneers, I'm not giving him a long-term 4-year contract. I'm probably giving him 2 years, and I may do like 2 years, $30 million, or 3 years, $25 million. Or he probably has earned over $30 million. I probably do either 2 years, $60 million, or 3 years, $80 million, somewhere in that range. But Tampa Bay, they're the 4 seed right now, winning their division. All division leaders host a playoff game. We'll get into Cowboys later, but I think Tampa Bay and Cowboys first round potentially could be a very interesting game. And not even to mention, I know Rachaad White was not great on the ground this game, and Jacksonville's actually a really good defense against the run. But Rachaad White had 20 carries for 39 yards, but he's also picked it up in the rushing department here in the last few weeks. So I think Tampa Bay, I think they could potentially win a playoff game. I don't think they're going to go on any run the playoffs. I think they win a game and then they probably lose in the divisional round. But I think, if you're a Tampa Bay fan, you got to be happy that they're going to find a way to probably get in the playoffs and host a playoff game. And, they may give their team that they play against some trouble. Speaking of those Cowboys, we will now talk about the game on Sunday afternoon, the 3:00 slate, Dolphins versus Cowboys. It was a game where I left unimpressed by both teams. I know the whole narrative was Cowboys can't win on the road and the Dolphins can't win against winning teams. And the Dolphins have not won against a over 500 team in over a calendar year. So the fact that they were able to, not destroy that narrative, but kind of silence that narrative a little bit and beat the Cowboys, credit goes to them. But watching this game, I still have major question marks about both teams, especially their quarterbacks. I know Dak's been on a tear lately. He's been, not even lately. The last 2 weeks, he's kind of struggled. I know he threw 2 touchdowns in this game, but there was a stretch in the middle of the season where he was lineup defenses. I believe he had 21 touchdowns compared to 1 interception in a stretch during the season. But those came against pretty bad teams, and that's always been the thing about the Cowboys is that, and it seems like this is the thing every year, they beat up on the bad teams, but when you need them the most in the big spots, they shrink. And that includes Dak Prescott. And he didn't particularly play bad or, shrink at the end. He actually led a drive to take the lead late in this game with about 2-3 minutes left before Dolphins drove and kicked the field goals. Time expired. But throughout the game, you kind of saw that he's just not the same quarterback on the road. They scored on their second possession, going up 7-3, and then after that, their offense just sputtered out. And that's been the case this year on the road. Dak Prescott is a completely different quarterback on the road. He dominates at home or against bad teams, but when he plays, pretty good competition, especially on the road, he doesn't play as well. And you saw that again on Sunday. The running game, Tony Pollard, Mike McCarthy said before the year they want to run the ball more, but Tony Pollard, he's just not that type of running back. 12 carries, 38 yards. The Dolphins aren't particularly a great run defense. They're not bad against the run, but they're not great. But he didn't really do much on the ground. CeeDee Lamb continues to dominate this passing game. This offense is very dependent on Dak Prescott and CeeDee Lamb connecting. CeeDee Lamb had 10 targets, 6 catches, 118 yards, a touchdown. The next leading pass catcher, targets perspective, Jake Ferguson had 8 targets and only 4 catches for 45 yards. So when you kind of look at that, and Brandon Cooks, their number 2 receiver, had 2 targets, 2 catches, 14 yards, and a touchdown, which was a late touchdown to put the Cowboys up 2019. But yeah, Cowboys, I don't think either of these teams, and I'll get into Miami here right after this, but I don't think these teams are Super Bowl teams. I think they're teams that, could win a playoff game, but if both these teams have to play on the road, and the Cowboys will now have to play on the road in the NFC because they lost this game, and the Eagles ended up winning their game against the Giants, which the Eagles have not been impressive about a month and a half. They have not been playing good football, and they won the game on yesterday, which you'll take. You'll take a win this late in the season, but barely beating the Giants 33-25, and the Giants having a chance to somehow tie the game on the last drive. It's not good for the Eagles, but the fact that they play Arizona and the Giants in their final two games, I mean, they should win this division. As for Miami, like I said, they won the game, found a way to get a field goal as time expired, had multiple third down conversions on that final drive. But the reason, and it's the same thing for the Cowboys, why I don't necessarily think the Cowboys are a Super Bowl team. The Dolphins, Tua does not scare me. If I'm playing as Tua in the playoffs, I'm not scared. That's the reason why I don't believe the Dolphins are a Super Bowl caliber team. I think they could be a dangerous offense in the postseason, but like the Cowboys, it's Tyreek Hill dependent. Jalen Waddle once again exited a game with injury. Mike McDaniels said it looks like a high ankle sprain, which basically means he probably misses this upcoming game against the Ravens and Baltimore, a defense that has been lights out throughout the season, especially late on here in the last few games. And it's Tyreek Hill or nothing in this offense. I know Mostert has been on tear touchdown-wise. He has 21 touchdowns. But this offense is really predicated on Hill's production. And Hill in the first half had one catch, and you kind of saw that's what they reflected on Miami's score. Miami, they only scored one touchdown in this game. And it was late in the first half to Mostert with about 21 seconds left in the second quarter. Right before halftime, they scored a touchdown, a 4-yard pass to Mostert. That was the only touchdown of the game for Miami, and they really sputtered out once they got in the red zone. They had to keep settling for field goals, or I believe they had one fourth down conversion that they failed, which I don't understand the play call at all. You have these long developing routes on the 5-yard line and then Tua gets pressured and has to throw basically a contested catch out of bounds. Wasn't really close. Miami, because I don't believe in Tua, I think he's a pretty average quarterback with a bunch of good weapons and a really good system, really good scheme led by Mike McDaniels. And because I don't really trust Mike McDaniels in this coaching staff when it comes to time management, timeouts, late game situations, I don't trust the coaching staff. And their defense has played really well, but when it comes to playoffs, it comes down to situational coaching and quarterback play, and both those are pretty low in my belief. I have pretty low beliefs in both of those. I don't think Tua's one of these really good quarterbacks. I think he's fine. He's solid, but he's not going to elevate the pieces around him. He needs pieces around him to elevate him. And, he has a contract extension potentially coming up. I would not pay him. One, you have the concussion issues, which is unfortunate. You don't want any player to have to deal with that and have to deal with the scares of having a concussion constantly. And two, I'm not paying him because the quarterback market's continuing to grow, and these quarterbacks are soon making $55-60 million a year. I'm not giving a contract with this quarterback market growing. And I don't think he'll command as much, but he may try to leverage himself into getting a deal worth 45, 50, 55 million a year. And if I'm Miami, once his rookie contract's up, because they already accepted a 5th-year option, which I would have done the same thing probably. Once that's up, I think they try to restart this quarterback contract clock by drafting a rookie at some point after his contract expires. Or maybe they go out and they go sign a free agent quarterback. But I think in today's NFL, a coach wants to find his quarterback by drafting and developing one. And I think if you can easily, in this system, with these weapons, you can draft a rookie quarterback and he can develop just fine. I know Tua, very accurate anticipation. Those are probably elite attributes to his game. But his size, I don't think he has the greatest arm. He's not that mobile. When the play breaks down, he's not productive. I mean, we saw that a couple weeks ago against the Titans on Monday night. Tyreek Hill suffers an ankle injury, And as soon as Tyreek Hill goes out, Tua and this offense look completely inept, unable to move the ball on a Tennessee defense that's vulnerable to the pass. So Miami gets the win. They're the 2 seed. They have a chance to steal the 1 seed from Baltimore if they win this week. And my opinion may change if they're somehow able to beat Baltimore. But right now, I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. And really, if they lose this game against Baltimore and Buffalo's able to beat the Patriots, which both are highly plausible scenarios, Week 18, Miami and Bills would be playing for the division. And right now, my money would be on Bills if that scenario played out to win that game in Week 18. So I think Miami, this is pretty much, I think it's a must-win game, and it's a tough must-win game on the road at Baltimore, a team that just absolutely played their best game probably the season last night, and we'll talk about that here shortly. Miami's in a tough spot right now, and it's good. If they didn't win this game against Cowboys, I think it's a for sure lock they're not winning the division. But since they were able to take advantage and win, I mean, you have to give them credit there. They kept their division title alive, but it's tough. If they don't win this week and Bills win, the Week 18 will be a game for the division. A game that, I sat and watched with my family. We're all Chiefs fans. Chiefs Raiders yesterday. Raiders beat the Chiefs 20-14. It was really a disappointing game on all facets for the Chiefs. There was not one time during the game where I felt like the Chiefs were playing good football. Even when the Chiefs scored the touchdown, at that point I felt like the Chiefs were going to win the game. I mean, even when Chiefs were down 17-7 late in the second quarter, going to the second half, I was still confident that Chiefs were going to find a way to win. But when you are playing, I mean, Chiefs, I believe, had negative 18 total yards because of sacks and all that taken into account. Negative 18 yards in the first quarter, which I saw a stat during the game. It was the least amount of yards since the Rams in, I believe, 2004. There was some game in 2004 where the Rams had negative yards in the first quarter. And to play like that against the Raiders, I mean, a team that you dominated, a rookie quarterback, not to mention that Aiden O'Connell had 62 yards passing the first quarter and finished the game with 62 yards and didn't complete a pass after that. Or I think there was a stretch where he didn't complete a pass in like 10 passes, but he finished the game with 62 yards. And he did not complete a pass after the first quarter. Didn't complete a pass. 62 yards, finished 62 yards. The Chiefs' problems, it's all going to go to the wide receivers, which it should go to. But there's so many different variables of why this offense is struggling. One, like I just said, the receivers are dropping passes. They're not getting open. Two, the offensive tackles. Now you're starting Wanya Morris yesterday at left tackle because Donovan Smith is out with injury. But Juwan Taylor's been an absolute disaster of a contract or a free agency signing. Chiefs signed a 4-year, $80 million deal this past offseason. And he's been absolutely terrible. Penalties, penalties, not lining upright, holding calls, false starts. It's a whole thing. And you're kind of seeing Patrick Mahomes. And I know Patrick Mahomes has not probably handled himself the best way on the sidelines or during games, yelling at teammates. But he's held this in for the whole season. I mean, he's taking blame for drop passes throughout the year. MVS dropping the game-winning touchdown potentially against the Eagles right in his hands. Mahomes takes blame, saying he could have thrown it he threw it a little too far. That when you continue to take the blame for your receivers, Kadarius Toney dropping multiple passes that lead to interceptions. Week 1, pick 6 because of Kadarius Toney. Then Kadarius Toney drops a pass that would put the Chiefs in field goal range. Chiefs would probably have won the game. Patrick Mahomes is taking a lot of blame for the receivers this year, and it's finally starting to boil over. And you kind of saw that boiling point against the Bills a couple weeks ago when Toney lined up offside. You saw Kelsey yesterday get really frustrated throwing his helmet. And Kelsey, it's hard to say this, but I think Kelsey, he's not washed, but I think he's definitely over the hill. I mean, yesterday, 5 catches, 44 yards. Rashee Rice has been leading the team in targets for the most part the last few weeks. And that was kind of the thing with the Chiefs last year was when you look at the Chiefs receivers last year, it was the same group of guys except you had Juju Smith-Schuster. And that's definitely not the strongest receiving core in the league. But you had Travis Kelce there that could be the safety blanket, kind of be a band-aid for the offense when receivers weren't getting open. But this year he doesn't have that extra gear to beat double teams, to find the open space. And you're kind of seeing that. And I don't think, when you look at the Chiefs receiving core compared this season compared to last season, all you're really doing is taking away Juju Smith-Schuster and adding Rashee Rice. The problem is, like I just said, Kelce slowing down. And I think the rest of these receivers have regressed immensely. I mean, MVS had 80-something targets last year, and he's barely – he had 0 catches yesterday. 0 catches and 1 target. No Kadarius Toney yesterday because he is dealing with a strained hip. Sky Moore is on the IR. Both options not great options at all. But when they're off the field, this offense looked completely awful, completely lost. It looked way too difficult for Patrick Mahomes to orchestrate this offense. And yeah, maybe some of that's on him, and it's definitely some of it's on him. But when he has to run around, and like I said, I think he's running around, quickly abandoning the play because he doesn't trust his tackles either. His tackles are consistently getting beat. And you kind of see that he will abandon the pocket early on. And he's always been a player that leaves the pocket earlier than he should. But this year he's doing it much quicker. And you're kind of seeing he can't trust anybody right now. His offensive line, the exterior of the offensive line is not playing well. His receivers are dropping passes. They're not getting open. He's losing trust in the team around him. Now, defensively, the Chiefs have been great. You can't blame the defense, I think, for one game this year. Defense is allowing, I think, 17 points a game, 18 points a game. If you told me that before the year the Chiefs defense was allowing under 20 points a game, under 21 points a game, I may be saying, man, Chiefs are probably right now probably 12-3, 13-2. Instead, the Chiefs are 9-6, haven't clinched their division yet. They're the 3 seed out of the 1 seed race. And now they have to face the fact that they will not be most likely hosting an AFC Championship game, even if they get there. They may not even get there. Right now, if the season was over today, they'd be facing Bills first week of the playoffs. I don't know if they win that game. I think Bills have had a lot of success in Arrowhead. I think Bills would win that game the way they're playing. I know Bills didn't really play great this past week. They barely skated by the Chargers. Late game winning field goal by Tyler Bass, won by 2 points. But they're running the ball well. Defense, I know, still dealing with a lot of injuries, but defensively they're playing well. Josh Allen can always make a play out of nowhere, which is the reason if the Chiefs were the 3 seed and they had to choose between playing Miami and Bills, it would be easily the Dolphins. You would rather play the Dolphins all day with Tua. Josh Allen, you can have Josh Allen dead to rights and he'll make a play and break your defense. The Chiefs right now, it's a first because before this week and throughout the year, I've always had this hope, confidence that the receivers would figure it out. Yesterday was the first time I'm watching a Chiefs game, and I'm thinking to myself, this isn't a Super Bowl team. They're not going to figure it out. And that's tough to say when you have Patrick Mahomes. Ever since the Chiefs have had Mahomes, they've always figured it out. Because there's always been stretches. There's been stretches during Mahomes' tenure where they've struggled. But this year is completely different. You always had a Tyreek Hill. You had a Kelce in his prime that you could look to in moments where nobody else is getting open. Now it's like nobody's open. Kelce's doubled. Pacheco picks up another injury. You're depending on Clyde Edwards-Helaire in the run game. Jerry McCain's on the IR. Right now, Chiefs are in a tough spot. And at this moment, I don't think they're a Super Bowl team. What's weird about the NFL this year, and I'll probably get more into this talking about the next game. If you had to make a Super Bowl bubble and say like legitimate Super Bowl teams that could win the Super Bowl, get the Super Bowl, I don't know if there's more than 2 teams in there. And that may be hyperbolic. But right now, Ravens and 49ers, I think, are the clear top 2 teams in the NFL. And I think there's a big tier gap between those teams. I think there's a huge gap. I think it's those 2 teams and the rest of the field. Now, I have question marks about both teams still. And let's go right into that game right now. Ravens absolutely manhandled the 49ers last night. It was 33-19, but that's probably closer than it could have been. It was 33-12 before 49ers scored to Sam Darnold because Brock Purdy picked up a groin injury. And that game, watching that game when it first started, Ravens go 3 and out. I think they take like 40 seconds off the clock. Just a quick 3 and out. 49ers get the ball. Kittle gets about 18-yard catch, and then Kittle gets a 58-yard catch, or 53. Yeah, because he had 71 yards in the first drive. And I'm thinking, man, 49ers, they're going to score here, and this game could quickly turn. And I know that's quick to say just on one drive, but the way that they forced the Ravens in 3 and out and then quickly got the ball down in the red zone, I'm thinking, man, 49ers may prove me wrong. Because I think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback, but I think all this MVP talk and all that's been over the top. I think McCaffrey before this game should have been the MVP of the league, but it's a quarterback award, so he's not going to get it. And then Brock Purdy throws a costly pick in the red zone. And that was the first of 4 interceptions for Brock Purdy. And most people are going to say, 2 of the interceptions were tipped, 1 his arm got hit. But interceptions are not all just – when you look at interceptions, not just, the interception happened, but it's also decision-making. The third pick he threw, he's scrambling the pocket. He evades pressure, escapes pressure, rolling to his right, and he throws a ball back towards the middle of the field. And the ball didn't even have a lot of zip on it. When you look at, and that's kind of the limitations of Brock Purdy's arm. And he's been good, but that he definitely has limitations on his arm talent. And he throws the ball back in the middle of the field. It gets tipped up. And Kyle Hamilton makes his second pick of the game. So it's just things like that where I think that's my main question mark about the 49ers is Brock Purdy. I mean, he had 4 interceptions last night. He threw 3 interceptions on 3 straight drives in the first half. 3 straight drives ended in interceptions. You're not going to win football games like that. And Brock Purdy, when things are going well, when the team's dominating, which he does have a part in that, I'm not going to take anything away from him in that. But when the team's coasting in games where they have substantial leads, he looks great. And the 4 losses this year, they're averaging about 18 points a game in those 4 losses. And he's in all his games. He's either turned the ball or he's just not looked good. Trent Williams went out last night with a groin injury. We'll have to see what the extent of that injury is. But if he's out for, extended period of time, and I don't think he will be, but if he is, your left tackle situation is in not a good situation. And not to mention the fact that the backup left tackle and the third string left tackle both left the game with injuries as well. So if the 49ers, because the 49ers offensive line, it's Trent Williams, and that's about it. You can't really trust the rest of the offensive line. The rest of the offensive line is not good. If Trent Williams is out, this 49ers team they're in trouble. They'll be in the playoffs. They're already clinched playoff spot. They've already clinched their division. I think most likely they finish with a 1 seed. But I will believe in Brock Purdy if they get a Super Bowl this year and they're in situations where it's not team friendly for the 49ers and he overcomes that. Okay. Maybe I'm sold. But right now I'm still not sold on Brock Purdy. I think he's a good quarterback, but do I think he's a game-changing quarterback? I don't know. I think he has a lot of weapons around him. And I mean, when you have this many weapons, yeah, you should be successful. He's been successful, so I'm not going to take that away from him. But people saying he's MVP of the league and all that, it's just hard to say that for me, to be quite honest. I think McCaffrey, Purdy's probably not the best player on his team. Not even on the offense. McCaffrey's better. Devo's better. I think Ayuk is personally a better football player than Purdy, and people may have an argument either way. But I think when you look at that, I still think he's the MVP of his own team. So I can't have the MVP of the whole league. A player that will probably win MVP of the league, even though his stats aren't groundbreaking, is Lamar Jackson. And a lot of it is the eye test. And I've been not fully on the Lamar Jackson train, not fully not a full believer in him because I still want to see success in the playoffs. But last night was very impressive. He was clearly the best player on the field, and he dominated. After that first drive, 49ers really had no answers for Lamar Jackson. Lamar Jackson finished last night 23 of 35 for 252 and 2, also adding 45 yards on the ground. And he made a huge 3rd and 16 play towards the end of the first half. I was like, he's just going to run for a few yards and they're going to sell for a long field goal. But instead he gets the first down. And they end up still kicking a field goal on that drive, but a much more manageable field goal. And they were able to take the rest of the time off the clock in that quarter. Because if they get stopped on a 3rd down, 49ers have about 40, 50 seconds left on the clock. So the fact that they were able to take the rest of the time off the first half, that was monumental because the 49ers also got the ball to start the second half with the football. So that was huge in itself. And then after that, they took full control, and Baltimore's defense set the tone in this game. They punched the 49ers offense right in the mouth. 49ers are a team that are used to dominating and making a team feel inferior. And that's exactly what the Ravens did to the 49ers last night. 49ers are usually the bully, and they got bullied last night. The Ravens absolutely took control of this game once San Francisco turned the ball over on their first drive. That's when the game kind of momentum kind of flipped. I know the 49ers got a safety as well, but after the Ravens were able to score the first touchdown and get the interception on the first drive, that's kind of when I think the confidence grew for the Ravens defense that, okay, we can stop these guys. Once we get to the quarterback, once we force the quarterback in tough situations, we can take advantage of it. And that's exactly what they did. So I think right now, and I was talking about this before I got into this game, I think right now the Super Bowl, this may be a very anticlimactic NFL playoffs this year. We may be heading to a collision course of Ravens 49ers. There's so many question marks with other teams, but I still think 49ers have question marks for their quarterback play. But if I'm taking overall roster, 49ers have a number of Hall of Famers on this roster, and like Chris McCaffrey, George Kittle, Debo, Trent Williams. You have Nick Bosa, Fred Warner. It's what I think 6-7 names right there. 49ers, I'm taking that roster easily over the rest of they probably have the best roster still in the NFL as a whole. They definitely still have the best roster. Baltimore probably is the most dynamic quarterback right now, playing his best football right now. And when you look at NFC, Eagles not playing well. Lions, I think they won their division on Sunday, but they barely escaped that game with a win against Minnesota, even though Nick Mullins gifted them with 4 interceptions. And I still have my question marks about Jared Goff. Tampa Bay, I think really good story this year, playing really good football for themselves. They're not gonna threaten the 49ers. Cowboys, I think they have no shot against the 49ers. 49ers have dominated them in recent years. Rams, I think Sean McVay's had his team playing really well. I don't think they can handle that roster of 49ers. And then Seattle. 49ers have had Seattle's number for a while now. So just looking at that. And then Baltimore, you got Miami. I've already talked about my questions with them. Chiefs, limitations on the offense, especially receivers, going to hold the team back. Jacksonville, I'm not sure how good Trevor Lawrence is. I still think he's a franchise guy, but he's dealing with another injury. He's definitely not 100% going into the playoffs. High ankle sprain, had a concussion last week, and then injured his shoulder this past week. He's clearly not 100%. He's clearly not playing that well either this year. Cleveland's interesting, but am I really going to take Joe Flacco over Baltimore and Lamar Jackson? Probably not. Even though I think they could be a dangerous team in the AFC. I think it would not surprise me if that's the AFC title game, if that's somehow what it is. But I think Ravens would win that game. Buffalo, I think Buffalo's weird because I think right now they're playing really good football, but at the same time, there's just something missing there. Stephon Diggs, I don't think he's washed by any means, but there's just something about defense either playing him or there's always been that thing floating above Buffalo with Stephon Diggs and the team and Diggs potentially whine out after the season. And I think that's kind of playing out a little bit. Colts, you got Gardner Minshew. It's a very young team as well. You're not going to do anything. So right now, I think and you have Houston on the outskirts. Pittsburgh's not going to do anything. I mean, they have great defense, but quarterback plays terrible. Offensive calling still bad. I think right now I think these two teams are clearly the best two teams in the NFL, and I think we are potentially on a collision course with those two teams. So I think this past week was a really great week of football. There was actually a lot of good football, a lot of interesting storylines, a lot of things to talk about coming from this week, and really entertaining week of football as well. I thought there was a lot of games that came down to the stretch. But I think playoffs right now, you're seeing two teams stand out from the rest, and I think that's how it's going to play out. I think those two teams get in the Super Bowl, and Luke and I will get into our playoff predictions once the playoff picture is finally cemented and finalized. But those will probably be my two picks if we did our full playoff predictions. And those may be Luke's as well. I know Luke's very confident. He's always been a huge Lamar guy. He believes in the Ravens, and he likes Brock Purdy more than me. So if I think 49ers get there, he probably thinks so as well. But that will do it for our episode this week. Luke will be back next week. We'll probably get more into playoff races, extension of our conversation today. And then following week 18, Luke and I will be doing a mock draft episode with the first 18 picks being locked in once the playoffs are set. We'll do picks 1 through 18 mock draft following week 18. But until then, make sure to like the video, subscribe, and as always, we are open to any ideas you guys have. So always leave comments to the videos, and hope everybody enjoyed their Christmas, and hope everybody has a happy New Year.